Hello，你好，Welcome back，欢迎回来to Wisdom Wednesday with Johnny Tiger on April 28, 2021. So last week we talked about the old court systems and old legal system in Chinese history and how different it was compared to today. Now, I did say that this episode we're going to talk about sentencing and at the execution. But then I decided that sentencing and execution will get really, really lengthy. So what I'm going to do is we're going to talk about specifically sentences today, and next week we'll come back and focus a little bit more on the gruesome, gory details and the various strange traditions surrounding execution. I'm going to try to keep this as educational and less gory as possible, even though I know some people are looking for the gory details. But hey, if you're looking for all the uh, horrific ways how people can get executed, you can look up on YouTube 10 or the most gruesome, the most terrifying executions in human history. There were already great videos made on those, and there's a cat blocking uh, the camera. I know Tiger is sitting on the table. Uh, so yeah, when it comes to execution, I want to specify this just in case you guys are thinking, oh God, I don't want to watch that because I don't want to get scared and all that stuff. Don't worry, I'm going to try to keep it as educational and cultural as possible. Now, today, let's talk about sentencing. So, after you already gone through the legal system and all the arguing, all the spanking, we talked about the kind of ways they use to make people confess. They can spank you or do some kind of torture during the court procedure. So, after all that is done, what happened next? Well, usually what happened next is the magistrate will pronounce your sentence. Now, one thing that's quite interesting in ancient China is there was really no uh, long-term prison term. So they didn't do the you're going to be in jail for 2 years, you're going to be in jail for 5 years kind of thing. Uh, the only time they would do that, the only time they would actually keep someone in jail for a prolonged period of time was for political purposes. So let's say you offended someone very powerful, and that person want to get you out of the spotlight, but you are too important for them to kill or for them to outright dispatch off. Maybe you have a lot of connection yourself, and you have you bribe all the right people. So in these cases, you are going to get put away in jail. Uh, they're going to basically the magistrate is going to say, put Tiger in jail until I make a decision on his sentences. And these political prisoners or prisoners of war that were very important, they get put away in jail until they get exchanged or until something happened that they get released. So those were the only people that would get kept in jail for a prolonged period of time. But other than that, most of the time sentences were pronounced on the very same day that you sign or you put your handprint on your confession. For the most part, sentences for minor crime come in the form of monetary contribution. You have to pay so much to the magistrate. You have to compensate, reimburse the victim so much gold or silver, or it comes in the uh, form of how many canes, how many times you can get hit, you get your butt beat. So more spanking, more whipping. The magistrate may say, for your crime, I sentence you to suffer 45 lashes, payable in one installment. That means you can't do 20 today and 20 tomorrow. You have to suffer the whole thing today. A lot of time, when people get sentenced for those things, they will quickly get in contact with their family member, get them to bring more silver, more gold to bribe the magistrate or bribe the people that actually carry out the sentences so they wouldn't suffer so much or they can get the sentences reduced so they wouldn't get injured too badly. On more substantial crimes, people get sentenced from having their belongings, their assets uh, taken away. So this actually happened a lot to rich people. If you're a banker or if you are owner of a farm, quite often your sentence would be you lose your farm, you lose your company, you lose your store, and you sometimes if the offense is serious enough, you can even lose the people in your family. The magistrate have the power to order that your house, your belonging, your assets become the property of the imperial court and your people, your son, your daughter, your wife even become the property of the imperial court. And what usually would happen is these people uh, lose their status as a citizen. They become slaves. They get marketed off to be servants or prostitutes in these cases. This is very, very harsh punishment. Scaling up from there, let's say you did something uh, really serious, like manslaughter. You killed someone in a fight, even though it's self-defense, but you killed someone, or you were accused of stealing a lot of money from someone else, and it's a very, if it's big enough amount, that is serious. What they will sentence you to is it's called fa pay, FAPA, fa pay. What that means is uh, basically banishment, and uh, the the magistrate may say, okay, for your crime, I'll fa pay you to uh, Xinjiang province, and you have to work as a slave or you have to work in a mine there for 40 years before you can return to Shanghai. Now, this is something quite serious because first, you can't take your family with you. Your family can't go with you. Uh, Second, when you are sentenced to fa pei, to be banished, to be exiled, they take you and they brand the mark of the criminal on your face. So you can't run away. Anyone who, if you run away and people see that mark on your face, that mark is burned into your face, uh, anyone can report you or try to arrest you or even kill you and collect bounties. You become a fugitive for life if you try to escape that. Um, so a lot of time, people back then would actually, if they try to run away from their servitude, they would deliberately treat their pour acid on their face or burn their face to disfigure themselves so people wouldn't be able to see the brand of the uh, criminal on their face. Now, Fape was a really serious business because it's not like today where if someone say, okay, you committed a crime in California, we're sending you to New York. Well, we pop you in a van, we drive you to the airport, and then we fly you over to New York and pop you in jail there. No, it doesn't. It didn't work that way back then. Back then, if your sentence was fape, was banishment or exile, that means you, let's say you committed a crime, or let's say you're tried in California, and you get fape over to New York, and you have to walk every step of the way. You can't even ride a horse. You can't even. It's not like you can hire a buggy to travel there. You have to walk every step of the way, and worse than that, because they don't trust you. They can't let you do it on your own. So they detail a couple of prison guards that have to escort you over there. So imagine this: you are a condemned criminal. You got a brand burned into your face. That tells everybody you are a condemned criminal. You're you got ball and chain on your leg. You got shackles on your wrist. You can barely walk straight because all that heavy stuff that you're carrying, the ball and chain, the shackles, all the additional restraints that you're carrying, and then you have to walk from California to New York. Now, from California to New York, it's like 3,000 miles, give or take. 3,000 miles. An average human being walk at 3 miles an hour, which means if you can walk 10 hours non-stop at the same pace, then you can probably knock out 30 miles a day. So that 10 days would be 300 miles, and so it's going to take, wow, about 100 days, about 3 months of walking every day for you to get from California to New York. And we are not even talking about what happens if you run into bad weather, what happens if you get sick, what happens if you get injured, what happens if you are starving, there is no food on the way. Because these guards that are escorting you, it's not their job to feed you. They in fact, they are very angry at you because of you, they have to make this journey. At least once they get you to New York, you get to stay in New York. They still have to get back to California. Uh, so, for these prison guards, escorting you was something that they really hated doing. And as as evil as it sounds, a lot of the time back then, people who were sentenced to far pay to a different place, they never arrived at destination alive because the prison guard they didn't want to do it. So somewhere along the way, the prison guard is going to murder you in your sleep, and then they're going to turn around and come right back to California and tell the magistrate, Tiger tried to escape when we got to Arizona. So unfortunately, we had to kill him. So that's that. Saved them a lot of work, and it's not like they get paid any extra by escorting you all the way to the destination. So back then, when people were sentenced to far pay, to be exiled to a different place, to a different province, like that, it was vitally important for their family to really, really bribe the prison guard, the escort, and to promise them that if you arrive there safely, they'll get uh, 500 gold or 1,000 gold or something like that. There were even a lot of cases where when family members were so worried about uh, their family being exiled and they worry about the prison guard, the escort murdering them on the way, the family member would follow behind just to make sure that nothing illegal was going on halfway there. So once you get to New York and you report in to the magistrate in New York, you give them or your escort, actually your escort, hand over your sentences. Let's say Tiger murdered someone in California. Uh, it was an act of self-defense. So rather than death penalty, we are exiling them to New York, and now he has to work in New York for the next 40 years before he's allowed to return to California. So now it's a magistrate's job in New York to detail you to the labor camp. You either work as a slave, or you work in a mine, or you work in the library, or you work uh, in on a farm, depending on what kind of connection you have, what kind of influence you have, what kind of money you have. This is a very vital part of how you are going to spend your next 40 years. If this magistrate in New York really hates you, or just doesn't care for you, he's going to give you the worst kind of duty for the next 40 years. But if he knows that you are someone with good connection and good family, and he shouldn't abuse you, and he should treat you nicely, then it's totally his prerogative to say, well, I need a secretary for the next 40 years. I don't have a secretary, so can you be my secretary for the next 40 years? And so while you're there, you wouldn't have to do a lot of heavy labor. You can just hang around the magistrate all day long, help writing things down, taking notes, and delivering letters and stuff like that. So, how you are going to spend your next 10, 20, 30, 40 years is very, very much determined at this point. Once you arrive, and what kind of rapport you can establish with the magistrate in your destination. Back then, there was also a custom. There was also a custom of every time a new exile arrived at the destination, before the magistrate even look at why are you here, why were you sent here, before he even look at that, he's going to sentence you to get uh, beaten uh, again on the butt 40 times. The standard was 40 times. And this beating was called the beating of humility, the beating of humility, because obviously you were a bad criminal, you were a bad man. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sent here uh, and have to walk 2 or 3 thousand miles. And since you walk those 2 or 3 thousand miles, you obviously feel that you're really badass, you're really hardcore. So to teach you a lesson, to soften you up, we're going to beat you before we even do anything with you. We're going to beat you. Uh, we're going to hold you down, take off your pants, and beat you on the butt 40 times. It was quite common that a lot of criminals wouldn't be able to survive the initial beating, the beating of humility. A lot of them didn't survive through that because you got to consider that back then there's no uh, ease of transportation, there was no proper medical procedure. There was not a lot of convenience like today. So if you have to walk that 3,000 miles from California to New York, by the time you get there, you're not in very good shape. Your legs are probably all messed up. Your feet are probably all messed up. You probably have all kind of infection going through your system. You're starving. You're malnutrition. You're very sick by the time you get to New York. But before they even let you rest, they beat you 40 times with those big sticks that's filled with lead or mercury. Yeah, a lot of people didn't survive that part. So, in many ways, when a person is sentenced to be exiled, to far pay, it's almost like a death penalty. It's almost worse than death penalty. At least death penalty, you can just stay in the cell until they come and get you and then chop off your head. But To be exiled means you got to walk for thousands of miles and maybe die somewhere on the way, or maybe die at the beating of humility once you get there. Or even if you survive the beating of humility, if the magistrate decide that you need to work in the mine or in some dangerous places, you might die doing your duties while you are exiled anyway. So now we come to death penalty, and we are going to talk more about these next week. So this week I'm just going to lay it out to give you a basic outline of the various different kinds of sentences surrounding death penalty. For men, generally speaking, there were three different kinds of death penalty. Four, if we count there was one kind that can only be sentenced by really high-ranking imperial people, imperial officials like ministers and noblemen. But we'll talk about that in a little while. So the standard three kinds of death penalty for men, for women it's a little bit different. We'll cover that in a little bit too. For men, the three standard different kinds of death penalty. One is called 秋决, 秋决. You don't need to really remember how to say these. I'm just saying that in Mandarin so you guys get an idea. 秋决 means autumn execution. So what is autumn execution? That means this one is the most common. This one is reserved for the most common type of criminals, like people who go to the bar, get drunk, and kill someone by accident. People who raped someone. People who get into a fight and then kill someone by hitting them over the head. People who get drunk and then cause uh, harm or death to some people, that kind of stuff. So the more common criminals that needed death penalty get 秋决. 秋决 means they'll keep you in jail until the end of the year and then execute all of you who get sentenced 秋决 together. So um, roughly speaking, the date for children every year is around Thanksgiving. For the rest of the world, it's around that time. It's around the time of the harvest, the time of celebration, the time of the winter is coming. That's when they take all the children prisoners out to the execution square and then chop their head off uh, all at the same time. So it's like a mass execution at the end of the year, and it only happens once a year. Uh, we'll talk more about that in the next episode. But children is usually, like I said, tied to harvest and tied to greeting the winter and all that good stuff. So as gruesome as it sounds, a lot of these mass executions were carried out with a lot of people celebrating while this was going on. The second type is called 斩立决. 斩立决. 斩立决 means execute on the spot right now. He's so evil. Take him out there, cut his hair off right now. So there's no waiting. 斩立决 is in some ways a little bit more merciful for some people because there's no waiting. You're not rotting away in jail waiting for autumn to come. Basically, 斩立决 is used for people whose guilt and crimes were so horrific there's no doubt whatsoever. There's no doubt in anybody's mind that they were guilty and they were evil and they need to be gotten rid of right now. So these are usually people who get accused of serial murderers, serial rapists, uh, pedophiles, people who murder their own parents. people who murder their own children, although sometimes in some part of Chinese history actually say murdering your own children is okay because you gave them life, so it's okay for you to take it away. Uh, but some other periods say murdering your own children is not okay. So this kind of crime, this kind of really heinous, really gruesome crime that people have no doubt whatsoever that you are an evil bastard, then you will be sentenced to 斩立决. They don't even want to wait. They want to get rid of you right now. So after they pronounce the sentence, the guard takes you out there and go chop chop, and it's done and over with. The third type is reserved for the some of the worst kind. It's called gua. Gua, just one word. Gua. GWA. What is gua? A lot of you have heard of gua before. It's a death by 1,000 cuts. Gua is when the official pronounce that because of your crime, you have to be cut uh, 500 times or 200 times or 100 times before you're allowed to die. So the execution in this case is very slow, very torturous. The executioner will put away their sword and they will take a little scalpel or a little box cutter or whatever little butter knife or whatever and start cutting you, starting with your arms, one cut, one cut, one cut, and just keep working over your body. And when they think that you are bleeding too much, they'll treat you, they'll give you Medicare, they'll take care of you, put you away, let you rest up, feed you, give you water and food, and then when you heal up, then cut you again, and you'll have to fulfill all those conditions like 200 cards, 1,000 cards, 500 million cards, whatever. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the next episode. So this Gua execution, this style of execution, Gua is only usually sentenced to people who commit a crime against their country. So treason, speak, killing a government official, or one of the interesting things is a lot of people would get sentenced to Gua for fornication, for daring to rape a family member, committing incest, stuff like that. Those were the kind of crime that would result in a gua style execution. Now, if you were to have the bad luck of offending someone really high up, like the emperor himself or one of the royalties, then there's a fourth kind of execution, which is called 诛, Ju, 诛. What is 诛? In China, it's quite often, especially sometimes when an emperor pronounces an execution, the emperor will say 连诛九族, 连诛九族. What does that mean? That means not only you have to be killed, but your entire family up to the ninth generation. Ninth generation. So you, uh, you and your wife, that's one. That's one level. And then your parents, your father and mother, that's the second tier. And then your wife, mother and father, that's the third tier. Your children, that's the fourth tier. And then your cousin, your nieces, nephews. So basically, it go around 9 times. Anyone who's connected to you within those tiers have to be executed alongside you. This is not just a single execution. This is when you pissed off someone really, really bad on the higher level, and they decide that your whole family have to vanish from the face of the earth. This is almost like genocide, and this was uh, the kind of sentences that would happen um, when in cases of political intrigue. So let's say you've been plotting against a certain high-ranking minister, and he finds out and he wants to execute you. But he doesn't want to just execute you and then have your children plotting against them, or maybe your uncle plotting against them still. So just to be safe, they will wipe out your entire family in this Zhu style execution. Interestingly enough, Chinese people was kind of sexist, and not just in a daily way, but even in execution, because they believe that the gua style and the chopping off the head, is too uh, crude for women. Women were beautiful. Women were delicate. Women should have the right to die in a more dignified manner. So, in places of those executions, quite often there's a different execution pronounced for women called jiao, jiao xin, Jaosing, which means death by strangulation. Uh, when a woman is pronounced to be executed, the magistrate will order 绞刑 for the most part, although there have been examples of women suffering the death by a thousand cuts uh, before, but that's really, really rare. Uh, 绞刑 basically they'll take you out, but rather than cutting off your head, they'll put a white uh, piece of fabric around your like a white scarf around your neck and then strangle you to death. Uh, Still very very cruel, very painful, and you still die. But at least you don't bleed all over the place and you don't have to have your head sew back on afterward. You get to die with dignity. In some cases where the magistrate feel particularly merciful, they will send the female criminal back to her jail cell, and then when they deliver her dinner, they will bring her the white uh, piece of fabric and let her do it herself. She can hang herself uh, in her jail cell as a suicide, rather than having someone strangle her to death. So that is the kind of exceptions they would make for women in Chinese history. Now, this is I know it is a very grim topic, but uh, I personally find that uh, a lot of this have the kind of symmetry and intricacy that when we look away from the nature of what we're talking about, sentencing, executing, stuff like that, if we just look at them as all part of the long lost human history and how things were done once upon a time, and think about the thought processes behind these actions, and it really made me personally, it made me appreciate what we have today a lot more. Thank you for checking out today's Wisdom Wednesday. We'll be back again tomorrow for Toy Thursday. For now, 再见 and have a good night.